Hey there, everybody. My name is Stephanie, and I am kind of sort of new to the VC community. I haven't, I put a video out a couple of years ago, and I haven't had a good enough camera to keep going with the videos. So I finally got a new camera, even though it's my phone, but hey, it works. I wanted to show you, I've been picking up a lot of vinyl lately and, trying to add to my collection. And to tell you a little bit about myself, um, I, as far as my tastes go, I'm very eclectic when it comes to music. And so a lot of the music that I listen to is any ranges anywhere from classic rock to heavy metal to I listen to a lot of classic country to I don't listen to too much modern country. I think it ranges between, the 60s, 70s, and 80s around there. Some of the 90s country. And then I also listen to a lot of electronic music and techno music as well. And I listen to a lot of game and film soundtracks or scores. And some of my favorite bands of those genres, heavy metal would definitely be, the hair band era. I grew up in the 80s, and so Motley Crue, Poison, Cinderella, uh, a lot of those 80s hair bands. Um, there was a few mainstream heavy metal that I enjoyed, and some of which was Quiet Riot, Rat. Um, I loved Iron Maiden, and uh, just a lot of mainstream heavy metal. In the 80s, if it was heavy metal, then I loved it. And then when it started splitting into different genres, you get your goth metal, you get your uh, death metal, the black metal, and a lot of those. I just kind of dispersed into like one zone, and that was mostly goth metal and industrial metal. And I started listening to a lot of power metal bands. Blind Guardian, I started getting into recently. Iced Earth. Iced Earth is one of my favorite bands so far that have come out recently as well. And I'm really enjoying their music. The Dark Saga album is a good example. That's one of my favorite songs by that particular band. And then some of the goth metal is, I love um Lacuna Coil and that particular band. They're an Italian based band. And other bands that like the industrial bands like Disturbed, Static X, Marilyn Manson, a lot of those are as far as the heavy metal forte. Uh, when it comes to electronic music, it's got to be Tangerine Dream. I mean, I am a huge fan of Tangerine Dream. Have been so since the 80s, and I've collected quite a few of their vinyl. Um, you know, start of starting with my favorite album, um, that started the whole collection, and I had to special order this album simply because it has been out of print for many years, um, and that is Firestarter, the soundtrack to Firestarter. Um, it is the album that basically started. my love for Tangerine Dream. And I have, quite a collection of their vinyl, and I'm getting more. And I've been getting more recently of their vinyl. And ever since um, Edgar Froese, ever since he passed away a couple years ago, or last year, last January, um, it's been kind of difficult for me to listen to the music, simply because, sorry, I'm emotional, but I have had an emotional connection with the music. And after listening to their music for 35 years, almost 40 years now, it basically ingrained into my psyche and to my emotions. It's amazing how music can tie in with a lot of emotions and those feelings. I have a lot of memories of listening to a lot of their music. I found I found a single over at the my local record shop, and which is Warsaw Under the Sun, um, or Warsaw in the Sun. Sorry, and it's just a single, and it also includes Polish Dance and Rare Bird on it. These songs were actually on the Poland album as an extra. They were not included because it was during the Warsaw concert in 1984. And this is the album for Poland. That was the Warsaw concert that happened in 1984. And it includes Edgar Froese, um, and this is a gatefold, by the way, and I'll pull it out. Um, it includes, this is Edgar Froese, and then this is Johannes Schmeling, and then this is Chris Branca. And this trio was, in my opinion, was one of the best trios of Tangerine Dream, along with, some of the originals. There was Peter Baumann. He was one of the originals that was in the early 70s. Chris Franca, he stayed with the band from 1975 until about 1989, 1990, somewhere around there. And then Jerome Froese, Edgar's son, took over. Uh, and it was just him and his son for a while, Edgar and Jerome. Well, here's the gatefold opening to that, to the Poland album. And I had just recently picked this up at my local record shop. I freaked when I saw this in there because occasionally they do get in some Tangerine Dream, but it's expensive. And I think I paid about 15 bucks for this particular album, and it's one of my favorites. It's one of the very first albums I started listening to after the introduction of Firestarter. Um, it was one of the very first albums that I listened to it on CD, and I think it was around the early 90s that I started collecting the other albums on CD. I wasn't collecting vinyl at the time. It was all on CD, and which I still have to this day. And I wanted to get them back on vinyl because, of course, the sound quality is so much better. And I notice a big difference whenever I listen to their music, especially the higher tones, and then the bass tones are more profound. And this album from Tangerine Dream is Force Majeure, and I had to special order this one. because I'd been looking forever for this one, and I found it off of eBay for like 10 bucks, and which isn't bad considering, and it is an original album, so um, it's a UK pressing, I believe. Yeah, it's a UK pressing. Um, but I do have more Tangerine Dream. I can show you guys more of those later. This and as I add to my collection too, gradually I'll begin to show you more, um, because there's a lot of them, and they made well over 100 albums, so I have a ways to go. But these are some of my favorites, and yeah, there's those. And some of the soundtracks that I've started collecting that I found um, at my local record shop is this one right here. I'm sure, we all know who John Williams is. It's the soundtrack to Superman the movie from 1978. And this is a gatefold, and it's also a promo copy. I noticed a little notch there when I got this, and I'm like, yay ho, score! And there's the backside. And it has an awesome picture of the gatefold. Yeah, I had a bit huge crush on this guy. Chris Reeve, he was my heartthrob in my teenage years. I know. And the cool thing about these jackets are the inner sleeves have pictures of the movie on them, which is pretty cool. Um, and the vinyl, I mean, when I first saw the vinyl, it looked like it was unplayed. It was absolutely gorgeous looking. And it has a little bit of dust on it, and it, of course, has a sticker from the store. But, it plays beautifully. And, I had a playthrough on this a couple times, and it, there's no pops or dings or anything like that in this album. And so I usually like to crank it up and to listen to it. And then the next soundtrack follows along the same suit of Superman. It is, let me get this jacket back on. It is Superman 2. The music isn't entirely by John Williams. A man named Ken Thorne did the music to this. Yeah, Ken Thorne did this soundtrack, and I always liked the main theme of this particular one. Uh, you know, don't ask me why. I was a kid, and I just really got into the second one. I actually preferred the second movie over the first when I was growing up, and I could not believe that I found this soundtrack. And the cool thing about this vinyl, this particular inner sleeve sucks. It is one of those crappy plastic ones that bend and get crumpled up. So I'll be changing that pretty soon, but it has the Warner Brothers logo on it, so I think that's kind of cool. But I don't know if you could see on this vinyl, it has the insignia, the Superman insignia. Let's see if I can there we go. It has the Superman insignia all over the vinyl, which is really cool. And it has it on both sides. And what I would have thought of is it would have been really cool if they put the Superman insignia on the first album of the first movie, but unfortunately they didn't. But I thought that was kind of cool. They etched the insignia on this, and this came out in 1981, and it's also one of my favorite soundtracks. A lot of the music that I grew up with is partly from my parents doing. I grew up listening to a lot of their old 60s music, like the Monkees or the Doobie Brothers or the Eagles, and just a lot of the classic rock from the 60s and 70s, Bread. And as I was thumbing through my uh, local thrift shop, I came across a couple of albums that I thought were pretty cool. I didn't think I would find these, but I was lucky enough to come across a pretty good copy of the Doobie Brothers. And it does have a little bit of water damage in the corner here, but the vinyl is beautiful. It's a beautiful vinyl. So this is the What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits. This is that album. So it has the songs Blackwater and some of my favorites on there. And then I also found one of Julian Lennon's, which is John Lennon's son, one of his albums, the one that came out in the 80s, Velat. And I used to love that song when I was a teenager in the 80s, when it first came out. That and Too Late for Goodbyes. That's another song that I loved from this album. Yeah, that's that one. And I found that in a bargain bin for $1. So the vinyl on that, it looked, in great shape. Both the slip album cover and the album itself. Didn't look like it was played much. So that I found for $1. Now these next ones, these ones have been in my family for eons. Particularly this first one. It is the Monkees. This is their very first album. And this is actually my mom's album. She did make the mistake of writing her name at one point in one of the top corners. And it has seen better days. The album inside is, a little bit scratched up, and but the thing I like about keeping this album is that it's autographed by 3 of the members, by Davy, Peter, and Mickey. I took this album when the Monkees came in for a signing back in 1997, and I had them sign this album. There's Mickey, there's Peter, and there's Davy. And, when we recently lost Davy, it really took me back. And, I started thinking about their music again and how I used to listen to them even back in the 80s, because my mom introduced me to them. and I know all their songs by heart. And she actually got me this album when it came out in the 80s. That was then, this is now. And I have had this ever since then. And it's a gatefold. It has some really cool pictures inside. Um, you know, of the band back in the day, and it has a little bit of a story of the history behind the band, you know, from the TV show. And it you know, fascinated me when I was a kid, because I went and saw them when they came to Salt Lake uh, back in the mid 80s when they were having their 20th anniversary tour. And then I saw them again in 1997 when they came back to do a signing, and also came back for a concert that they were doing. And I recently found out that they're coming back again for their 50th anniversary. So that's pretty cool. The following album that I picked up in 1987 was Cool It. And they only had a couple of hits off of this album. It wasn't that great, but I thought it was kind of fun that they started coming out with modern music at the time. And, they, had a new awakening, so to speak. Even though Mike wasn't with them at the time, I kind of wished he was. And one of these days I'm going to get his autograph, but that's another story. Um, yeah, that is all I'm going to show you guys today. I have more. Some of them, are better than others. Some I've kept just for sentimental reasons for a long time, and so some of them are children's albums from the Disneyland records. There's several of those that I have that I'll show you guys. I grew up listening to those read-alongs and back in the 70s, and there's a few of those records that I really enjoy even to this day. So it brings back a lot of memories. But anyway, I just wanted to show you a few of the albums that I have, and introduce myself a little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to put up more videos in the future. Um, that is as long as my camera holds up. So, as always, keep them spinning, and we'll catch you soon.